Evening. On behalf of the Black History Month Committee at Stony Brook University, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Stony Brook University's annual Black History Month closing ceremony. We're delighted that you've joined us to culminate the month of February in celebration of the African American and Black experience. I am Cheryl Chambers, co-chair of the Black History Month Committee and Associate Dean of Multicultural Affairs. I will be your co-host for the first half of our program. The second half of this event will be co-hosted by Dr. Zebulon Maletsky, my partner and co-chair of the Black History Month Committee. Dr. Maletsky, welcome. Dr. Maletsky is an associate professor in the Department of Africana Studies and the Department of History. Earlier this afternoon, I'll have you know that Dr. Maletsky participated in another Black History Month program, the screening of the award-winning film, Ferguson Rises. And he was engaged in a live discussion with Michael Brown Sr., the director of the film, and Dr. Charles Robbins. So we're so glad that you're here. This is your second program of the day. And so
third, there's been stuff happening all day. This has been an amazing month, as you know, Dr. Jean Chambers, and we've had a beautiful, this has been a beautiful day of, so this event just couldn't come at a better time with some of the events that have been taking place today. So I'm just so pleased to be here and hoping to hear about some of those other events from folks who maybe were at those events today. So this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you. We have really a wonderful closing that has been planned, and we're honored to have as our keynote speaker, Michelle Mbekeani, one of our very own sea wolves, who's going to be joining us to speak on the theme for this year's Black History Month, which is Sankofa Social Activism. We will also enjoy a variety of cultural expressions by our students, and we're going to give some special recognition this evening as well. But before we begin, there are a few things that I would like to mention. We want to maintain this virtual format that will allow everyone to see each other. The audience, you in the audience, you have been muted throughout the program. However, you can use the chat to communicate with me as the co-host. And later on, we'll even tell you how you'll be able to pose questions to our keynote speaker, Ms. Mbekeani. So with that being said, it's my pleasure to move the program along, okay? It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rick McClendon, Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students in the Division of Student Affairs, who has joined us to give some remarks to open up our event. It's great to see you, Dean Rick.
Thank you, Dean Chambers and Dr. Maletsky, for the welcome. It is an honor and a privilege to speak to you at today's Black History Month closing ceremony. I would like to first give a huge show of gratitude to the Black History Month leadership and committee members, which is composed of volunteer students, faculty, and staff. Thank you for your tireless commitment and creative involvement in coordinating a thoughtful and engaging experience for the Stony Brook community. I am so excited to be a part of a community that celebrates the diversity of its people and is an inclusive place where people feel welcomed, accepted, and connected to one another. I hope that each of you took full advantage of the programs offered throughout the month, and after each experience, you took a moment to self-reflect. What did you learn? How were you inspired to act? And why are you called to serve? Black History Month is a wonderful time to step back and recognize the many great gifts of African and Black people who have brought to our nation such wealth and valuable contributions. We reflect on the past and applaud those who came before us for doing great things that have enriched our lives today. We give thanks for their hard work, sacrifice, and commitment to creating a better tomorrow. When you look back at your past life, will you be able to say, I have fought the good fight, I have finished my work, the world has gained new luster by my life? I leave you with this closing inspiring charge by English theologian John Wesley. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, and all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean Rick. Now, let us turn to an African-American tradition, lift every voice and sing, often called the Black National Anthem. And although, many people are familiar with this song, there are very few who know about its origins. So we just want to give you a short history lesson, in your hearing. James Weldon Johnson, who was a leader of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, he wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing back in 1899, first as a poem. And then his brother, John Rosman Johnson, composed some music. And a choir of 500 school children at a segregated school in Jacksonville, Florida, they sang this song. And that was a school where James Weldon Johnson was principal. So it was first performed publicly to celebrate President Lincoln's birthday. And then the song was later adopted by the NAACP and is the prominent, rally cry, and continues to be and was during the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s. So this evening we have Rihanna Bertram from the Stony Brook Gospel Choir. She's here to keep this tradition alive for Black History Month at Stony Brook University. And Rihanna, so glad that you're here joining us and that you will be lifting us up with Lift Every Voice and Sing. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicings rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Rihanna. That was absolutely beautiful. When I hear this song, it's just so soul stirring. You sang it for the Black History Month opening, and once again to close it, you have like the bookends of Black History Month this year. You're an incredible songbird. Thank you so, so much for that rendition. So now we move on with cultural expressions by our students. This year's Black History Month open mic spoken word contest has been a longstanding tradition on our campus. And so to present the winners of this year's contest is Isabel Brahini Schaefer, who is the Assistant Director for Student Media in the Student Community Development area. Isabel, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, so I just want to congratulate our first place winner of the Spoken Word Open Mic Night, and Julio Teku is first place winner. Congratulations to Julio, and I believe Julio's going to perform his piece for us.
Thank you. All right, the name of the poem is Don't Let Stoicism Kill You. 2 weeks ago made a year since my cousin Donovan committed suicide. He'd been battling depression for over a year, and we invited him up to New York from Maryland, hoping that a change in scenery would lift his spirits. He'd been going through so much internally, and to the untrained eye was doing fine, and the pain he felt inside ran so deeply that he would rather not be around than to keep living through it. Stoicism is defined as the endurance of pain or hardship without the display of feelings and without complaint. That sounds like a fancy way of saying emotional suppression. Now, see, I fancy myself a stoic guy, but at what point do I drop the act, put down the mask, and face the overcast of my not always sunny disposition? You see, to those who know me, I am excellent under pressure. My refusal to crack has honed a diamond exterior impervious to the thorniest of situations. My funeral will be attended en masse by people who attest to the fact that I can rise to the occasion. But what use is this reality when in my heart I know it's a fallacy? I lived the false dichotomy of either being there for everybody or no one being there for me. This disregarded the support system I had available if need be. I need help. I want help. I long for assistance. But like a soldier at attention, I dare not extend my hand. I battle against my own resistance. I cry when I'm laughing, when putting my contacts in, and when I do that long stretch in the morning that makes your legs shake as you're yawning. But oftentimes, my face is dry during moments when I should be mourning. Don't let stoicism kill you. Society has socialized Black people to be emotionally limited. Pride, anger, and lust are the presets, but Black isn't the absence of color, but the inescapable absorption of all of them. So I think it's time that we hit a hard reset and reclaim the full spectrum of our emotions. Emotions as complex as the amazing kinks and coils in our hair, emotions that run deeper than the richest, darkest shade of our melanin, emotions fuller than our stunning lips, emotional bandwidth as wide as our beautiful noses. Civil rights and freedom weren't won by Stoics, but those who wore their emotions on their sleeves and wielded their tongues as swords to cut through the hatred thrown at them, their feet stamping out the doubts of any and all who thought them incapable of emancipation. Emancipate your emotions and live in the fullness of your emotional truth. Humans are communal creatures. Cast down your burdens and let me carry it with you. There's no nobility in struggling when there's help available. Don't let stoicism kill you. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Julio. Congratulations again.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Absolutely outstanding, outstanding. Thank you, Julio, for sharing that and just reminding us how important, mental health and well-being is for all members of, in our communities, and that being our authentic selves is the healthiest way for us to maintain, it is general health and to live and to be and to exist in this world. Don't let stoicism kill you. A lot to think about and reflect on there. Thank you for sharing your talent and your skills and your insight, Julio. Now we will share with you some student art. We have some wonderful artists that we want to feature this evening. Beautiful work. And to present this segment of the program, we have introducing it, Esther Alatashe, who is the president of Black World and also a member of the Black History Month Committee. Esther, welcome.
Hi everyone. So yes, we at Black World, we had an amazing open mic night last week, which Julio had also shared his piece at. And it was co-hosted by the media office and the Woodby radio station. And so for this event, we reached out to different artists and photographers to spotlight them. And I have them here again to show you guys. And all of these pieces are honestly so creative and amazing to look at. So enjoy. So first here is Tanya J. She is a digital artist and a sophomore who is currently undeclared. But yes, this is her work, and also her Instagram is tagged where you can see more. And then here is Miles Bryan. He is a professional photographer. He has a business and a website, and he is a senior and a health science major. And his Instagram is also tagged. And then here is Cameron Williams. He is another spotlighted artist here, and he is a junior majoring in psychology. And then here is Deidre Redhead, who's actually here at the meeting, and she does photography, and she's a senior with a journalism major and international studies minor. Hi, Deidre.
I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to kind of showcase my photography. I don't really do it as much, it's more of a side hobby, but I was really happy to show when Esther reached out to me.
And then thank you for that. And then lastly is Gianna Cosia. She is in her second and final year of the physician's assistant program here at Stony Brook. And she submitted these to be shared. So thank you. That's pretty much all the artists that we included. And it is amazing.
Thank you so much, Esther, for introducing this beautiful work. And we certainly thank the artists for sharing their talent with us. You know, we have an incredible, amount of artistry and creativity, here at the university, and for students, particularly for Black History Month, to share their talents is really a special treat and, an extra treat for us. So thank you so much, students, for being a part of tonight's event. Yeah, and thank you, Esther. Student clubs and organizations. There are 325 at Stony Brook, and several of them have gotten together to express in a video how their organizations function on this campus and how they contribute to Sankofa, social activism. So we'd want to share with you a very brief video from some of those student groups and the leaders as a feature of tonight's celebration. But at this point, I will turn the program over to our co-host, Dr. Zebulon Maletsky, who will introduce these highlights of the student groups. Welcome back, Dr. Maletzky, and it's all yours now.
Okay, thank you. I don't have much to say about the video. It's going to speak for itself, but you know, as you said, we have a vibrant student leadership and student organizations. I've had a chance to see it. It's been out on Twitter. It's got a lot of hits, and if you haven't seen it, I hope you will enjoy it.
I am the current chapter president of the Theta Kappa chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated here at Stony Brook.
I am the arts and culture editor at The Statesman.
I'm a treasurer for Black World.
I'm the current chapter president of Phi Delta Psi Fraternity Incorporated.
I'm vice president of Black Student Union.
The business manager of the Stony Brook Press, as well as a PRO of the Black Student Union.
As the arts and culture editor, I have done my best, and I'm continuing to do what I can to make sure that I bring as much attention to our Black student population as I can through the newspaper.
Black World is a media club on campus, so it focuses on sending out media and publishing media that not honestly just focuses on social injustices done toward Blacks, people, Indigenous or Latino people. We also focus on Black culture, Black art, and Latino art and Latino culture to the world as well.
We hosted a Zeta Week. We had a scavenger hunt. The attendees didn't know what was the reason they were looking for certain items, but at the end it was explained. So for example, bed for Breonna Taylor, who unfortunately died in her home. The shoes was for Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed just taking a jog. The candy and the drinks was for Trayvon Martin, who just wanted some Skittles and Arizonas. And so being a voice for those who no longer have it.
We usually look for people that want to give back to our society, so we're driven by our motto, which is what we put into the lives of others comes back into our own. So we're basically looking for other individuals or students here on campus that also have that mindset. BSU has done a pretty great job of partnering also with the campus's NAACP branch to make events around Thanksgiving time for donations to be made. And then there was a protest on campus done by the NAACP, the BSU, and the Black Student Huddle. And it was incredible. The BSU and Black Student Huddle and the NAACP keep the spirit of social activism very much alive here on campus.
We published a Instagram series called Educate Yourself. And so through that, we were able to share educational material and quotes from various Black activists to bring awareness to various social justice issues. And that was like a really easy way to get information out to people through through the lens of social media.
If you're on campus as a commuter or a resident, I definitely implore you to get involved with the campus, the Black organizations on campus. Not only will you make lifelong friends if you're willing to put your heart out and extend a hand, but you're also going to learn a lot about the rich community we have here on Stony Brook's campus.
Hello. As I said, the video really does speak for itself. And if you haven't checked out, some of the student orgs or different clubs on campus, I encourage you to get involved. There's plenty to do. It's been a bit difficult with the pandemic in the last couple of years. And there's a couple generations that Dean Chambers and I both were saying we haven't even met yet. We don't know. So now that we're coming back, it's a great chance to get involved, and you can see the richness. And so we just salute our student leaders and our student orgs, and it's a long tradition at Stony Brook. That's why our opening speaker was an alum, and our closing speaker tonight, our keynote speaker, that is also an alum. But we're getting there. We're getting there. Before we do that, I'd like at this time to introduce Chanel Jones, who is the executive assistant to the assistant vice president of the Office of Equity and Access. And she will talk about the William McAdoo Memorial Scholarship and the Ralph Watkins Memorial Scholarship and who the recipients will be. Chanel?
Hi, hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight to be a part of this celebration. It's beautiful what's been presented so far, so thank you very much to all the participants. So for just introductions, the Dr. William McAdoo Memorial Scholarship was established in 2004 to honor the former chair of the Africana Studies Department, who was an enthusiastic supporter of diversity, equality, and social justice. This scholarship was created in his name to acknowledge exceptional students who excel in their studies while actively advocating for social justice issues, displaying their interest and commitment by participating, organizing, and coordinating a variety of extracurricular and community outreach or organizing activities, demonstrating leadership qualities and making contributions to diversity-related programs on the Stony Brook campus or in their communities. I'd like to congratulate this year's McAdoo Scholarship recipient, Linda Opang, who is a junior majoring in globalization studies and international relations. Congratulations. I'm not sure she's here tonight, so I'm going to move on to the Ralph Watkins Memorial Scholarship, which was established in 2006 in memory and honor of a former director of special projects for Stony Brook University in the late 1970s, which included the supervision of EOP and AIM, Upward Bound, and Disabled Student Services. Once serving as a Tuskegee Airman in World War II, he became a zealous supporter of social justice and served as the chairman of Suffolk County Human Rights Commission. This scholarship was established for underrepresented students with financial constraints who needed additional support to complete their education. Please let's congratulate this year's Watkins Scholarship recipient, Kristen Solari, who is a senior majoring in sociology. That's it for me this evening. Thank you to everyone who applied for the scholarships, and congratulations again to this year's winners. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. That's just marvelous. And again, I think, yes, let's give them another round of applause. Even, it's hard, folks. There's so much going on. And some people, if they didn't make the Zoom, we know that they're probably on their way. And we just hope that they're safe and healthy, happy, wherever they may be. And congratulations to the winners. Just hugely important, hugely important. It brings me to a thought. The level of excellence at Stony Brook University is not something that we talk about all the time. We don't want to get too, high in our laurels and stuff, but it is astounding. It's really something that needs to be mentioned. We can't mention it enough. So we salute you for your academic excellence and your achievements, and we thank you. Now, speaking of academic excellence and achievement, as you know, our keynote speaker tonight brings a lot in terms of background, in terms of experience, and who is really doing the work. You're about to hear about her, and you're about to find out a little bit more about the kind of work that's being done. It's a particularly kind of moving tribute and moment in my mind, because today, among other things, and throughout the month, we have been focusing on this theme of social activism, Sankofa social activism. And it's not an easy topic to broach, but some people who have been with us, and certainly our guest tonight, our keynote speaker tonight, has been doing that work. Among other things, have been working with something called the Innocence Project. Now, just encourage everybody to look up the Innocence Project and find out a little bit more about some of the writing of those injustices, some of the historical injustices that we've all seen. We've seen it on the news, we see it every day. And so it has come here tonight in terms of our theme, and we're just grateful. We're so grateful. And so there's no one that I know better to introduce our keynote speaker this evening than someone who embodies that academic excellence, and indeed who has been a teacher and a molder and a professor to help bring about that academic excellence. And so many of you know Dr. Tracy Walters, who is now a full professor of literature and Africana Studies, and whose home department is in the Department of Africana Studies, was chair of the Department of Africana Studies for many years. And she's going to talk to you and tell you about what her special relationship to tonight's speaker is and has been. So I give you Dr. Tracy Walters.
Thank you. Okay, Michelle, dear Michelle. So over the course of my career, I've taught probably more than 5,000 students. And many of these students I remember by name and face. And often these are students who leave a lasting impression on me, not simply because they are exceptional scholars or natural born leaders, but I remember them because they are the boldest, most audacious and ambitious young people, destined to make their mark on the world. My cat's trying to join me. They make this known while they are still students at Stony Brook University. As a professor, I'm not supposed to have favorites, but it's like parents who refuse to admit deep down they favor one child over another. And our guest speaker was nicknamed by her peers as one of my favorites. She was known as the Great Michelle. And I used to laugh and say it wasn't true, but it was true. It was true because what I knew then is what I know now. Michelle Mbekeani Esquire exemplified the best and brightest of our students. I knew she would go on to do great things in her life. I knew she would go on to do great things for her community. Her impressive list of achievements is the best we can hope for from any of our alumni. Currently, she is a senior legal and policy advisor for justice reform in the Cook County State Attorney's Office. And prior to that, she was a staff attorney at the Shriver National Center on Poverty Law. And there she focused on police reform, voting rights, and criminal justice reform. She had a wonderful career at the Shriver Center, where she authored a number of reports, among them one on handcuffs in hallways. They did an in-depth analysis of Chicago public schools' use of an in-depth analysis of Chicago public schools' use of school resource officers. She also authored and lobbied for legislation that mandated that police who interact with youth in schools must receive youth-specific training. She both co-authored and lobbied in Springfield for legislation that created the nation's first polling station inside a jail. This legislation enabled individuals incarcerated pre-trial to vote in person. Last year, during the legislative session, she led the lobbying efforts while working in coalition with the Innocence Project, the Northwestern Center on Wrongful Convictions, and the Illinois Innocence Project. They crafted a piece of legislation that prohibits law enforcement from using deceptive tactics when interrogating minors in custody, a practice that led to the false confessions of the exonerated 5. And this piece of legislation is the first to do so in US history. So many things, so many accomplishments, from being a former Emigre Memorial German Fellow within Germany's state parliament, where she advocated for language assistance programs for immigrant children in Germany, to being appointed by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker to serve as commissioner on the Illinois Juvenile Justice Commission. As a commissioner, she serves as the co-chair of the Reducing Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee and serves on the commission's executive committee. And she's also a former contributor for Forbes, writing on racial issues as it pertains to Black professionals. I am so delighted to welcome my Sora of Alpha Kappa Alpha here tonight. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Of course, you're like making me tear up. I was like, I didn't bring tissue. I had to use my face mask. Thank you. I used to be in your office during lunch period preparing for my law school application and just to talk. So it's very sentimental to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Mbekeani, and I was really excited to see that, this year we're really focusing on social activism for Black History Month. And I say that because, those concepts and principles are what kind of get me up every morning. I'm very excited about work every day, and it has just really this internal fire in me and kind of spurs this hope that I have that, Black people in America, Black people throughout the world, their experience throughout the world, navigating the world is not colored by the color of their skin. And so I bring that sense of excitement and urgency this evening. And so, while we've been celebrating all month, and it's an opportunity to celebrate the groundbreaking successes of our ancestors and the wildest dreams that have been awoken by the relentless and resilient activism of generations. And it is also an opportunity to celebrate the progress that we have made in stepping away from a nation that formerly stepped on the backs of Black bodies to build it. But it is also a month to confront the path that is still ahead. The path that demonstrates while the view from where we are as Black people in America is better than that of the rock bottoms of chattel slavery. We are long away from where the view is the best, the mountaintop of this nation's ideals. We're at the peak. Endless possibilities shine upon our children and generations to come. And this nation sees that elevating people of all colors to that peak is a symbol of a nation rising out of the darkness of violence, hate, and inequity. But for us to get to that mountaintop, it requires movement, a movement. This movement requires us to have the audacity to envision a Black America this country has yet to see. The audacity to envision a Black America that is not disproportionately represented in our criminal justice system, as hundreds and thousands of Black bodies are held captive in for-profit cages. The audacity to envision a Black America that is not systematically marginalized to the outskirts of America's compassion and concern. And a statement like Black Lives Matter is not deemed as some radical proclamation, but ingrained in this nation's values. We must have the audacity to envision a Black America in which institutionalized barriers do not bar us from the polling station, and our voices are no longer silenced by the muzzle of voter suppression and disenfranchisement. And again, we have to have that audacity to see a Black America where none of our communities experience economic droughts caused by racism's drainage of resources from our communities, barricading our access to education, housing, and employment. But finally, we must have the audacity to envision a Black America that we can change the architecture of a government system that has been so sophisticatedly designed to marginalize Black and Brown people. Yet despite white supremacy still being the architect who has the pencil and continues to sketch inequities into this country. And if we are to be committed stewards of racial justice, we must be in a constant state of discomfort by the state of our nation and how we experience it as Black people. We must all feel discomfort when we reflect on the fact that our prison populations descend from systematically marginalized, oppressed populations that hail from communities across the nation that have been disinvested in. We must feel this discomfort when we reflect on the fact that this country has a violent history of racial oppression, and that has now reincarnated itself into laws and policies disguised as public safety measures. We must all feel this discomfort when we confront the reality that we have dumped the inequities of our nation onto the criminal justice system. And why must we have this audacity, this resilient vision for ourselves and our communities? Why must we have and embrace this discomfort of knowing that we have yet to have that vision realized? Because to have those ideals realized is our ancestors' wildest dreams. And thus, our Black excellence demands it of us. These wild dreams were envisioned at a time where lynching was the norm and publicized in newspapers, at a time where we could not vote and it would be risking your life to try to do so, at a time when we had minimum, if any, access to quality schools and housing, and at a time where Black people, Black bodies were property given less dignity than animals. But yet, in spite of all of this, Our ancestors knew that their dreams would be awakened in future generations. And that is why every step of this movement must be celebrated for its courage. Every step of this movement shall be praised for its audacity. And every single step of the movement for Black lives must be trailed with rose petals, because our ancestors deserve their flowers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. It's a real, I think, joy for those of us who, especially who teach in Africana studies, like I do, my colleague, Dr. Walters, and all of us, who had anything to do, even if we weren't here. I don't think I was here when you came through, but I'm claiming some credit anyway. It's really, really special. I know it's special for our students who are watching and those who are, walking down the path that you've already blazed, that trail. And so thank you so much. One of the questions I know a lot of students will ask in class, they'll say, what rights, if I'm pulled over or if I'm, in a position or a situation in which, they're not sure how they're supposed to respond or react in a moment. We've had these moments of justice moments or in moments of injustice, more to the point. What advice would you give to young people? The Innocence Project was mentioned, for instance. You're in a room being interrogated. How do you know what to do? And how do you help clients and citizens in Illinois and in Chicago with that stuff?
But one thing that we've seen across this nation for well over a century is that you can exert your right. We know what your rights are. Law enforcement knows what your rights are. But when someone is killed unjustly by law enforcement, those rights hadn't changed. And so what I always try to tell people is protect yourself. You can roll out the Constitution, but that does not dictate how that officer is going to respond in that moment. And so, I think, me as a mother, a young child, 6 years old, but, a lot of parents of Black children, Black and brown children, we do have that conversation of what to do when law enforcement pulls you over. And I think it's that kind of that protective instinct of, yes, these are your rights. Yes, we want you to advocate for your rights, but there are other platforms and venues where you do not have to put your life at risk to advocate for those rights. So for instance, when you have those situations where, okay, someone was pulled over, in that circumstance, keep your hands on the wheel, as many people say. But now that we have like body worn camera, that is another layer of accountability where if we can see something was not to the book, that is something that is documented. And I think a lot of activists and community organizers have tried to create those layers, kind of create a safety net. So not in every single instance you are exerting your constitutional rights in situations where it may be deadly.
Yeah. And, I think Cheryl mentioned in the beginning, that today we had Michael Brown Sr., the father of Mike Brown, who was, murdered in Ferguson. And it was one of those things that was sort of a ground shaker. It was one that really, really, shook us as a nation. It's part of the reason that Black Lives Matter and other movements have come about. And people may not know about what you were just referenced, the conversation that Black parents often have to have with their children, especially young Black men and Black women, Sandra Bland, Rakisha Boyd. I mean, the names, the list goes on and on. Why do you think that we've seen so much of this in terms of Black bodies, being threatened, and really just, I don't know, put in harm's way? What can parents, especially those who may be parent, I'm a parent who are on, what should we be saying to our children, and what should we be saying to young people?
So it's interesting as we discuss about, what's current events in the past, decade or so. And a lot of times it's been kind of described as we're in a racial crisis, we're in crisis. And, you know, when you look at the definition of crisis, crisis is defined as a departure from the norm. And this, what we're seeing is not a departure from the norm. And I think we tend to have kind of a revisionist history of, okay, well, 1960s, everything's good, civil rights movement, we can vote. But, you know, we have a very violent history, violent history that was sanctioned, but that's permitted by law enforcement, that is embedded into our legislation, our policies, our policing practices. When we think of, you know, when law enforcement was first introduced, you know, it wasn't to protect Black people, it was to protect, you know, Black people, making sure they're not in certain neighborhoods. And so I always try to have that backdrop where this is not like, oh, this is something we're just so shocked is happening in America, where it's like, no, this has always been there. It's just being documented. You know, now we see it on social media. Now it's being elevated on a larger scale. And this is something that's not uncommon. And we see this actually happen in the civil rights movement as well, where people did not know what was happening below the Mason-Dixon line and Selma and so forth until media came down. When media started covering it, all the brutality, that's when you see buses of individuals coming down because they were forced to confront the violence that was occurring against Black people in America. It was in their living room, on their television. And it's amazing to see how media has been able to really shine light on something that's always been there. That's maybe been in the dark corners of certain smaller communities or where they don't have certain access to, you know, getting coverage from the media. But now that we're seeing that media is now in our cell phone and you can record it and you can actually disperse it to hundreds of millions of people within a click, that has elevated the movement to another level where people think, oh, this is an issue, though it's always been an issue. You're just now aware of it. So when it comes to that situation, I always try to remind people that, you know, this is not a departure of the norm. You're just seeing the norm now. Anything that's different is that you have access to what has already been. The other part you're discussing, can you repeat that second part in regards to?
You know, I have friends and colleagues who say, you know, I can't even watch the videos. They don't watch this, you know, they're seeing Black death over and over again. How do we deal with that as a community? How are you dealing with that? And you know, what are you seeing with that? And how are people dealing with that?
Well, you know, self-care is important. Self-care is very important, but at the same time, I always remind myself, you can't watch the videos, imagine watching the funeral and it's a loved one, you know, and these are people's lives. And so you don't have to watch the video to know what happens, but you need to want to do something in response to what happened. So, you know, I don't need to watch the George Floyd video. I know what happened. It was described. I don't need to see how gruesome it is for me to feel compelled to act. And so it's unfortunate sometimes we have to see the worst of acts to feel compelled, where death in itself should be sufficient for you to feel compelled to act and to speak out. And the other thing is, like, you know, video after video, there is fatigue. There's definitely, I mean, I work in the prosecutor's office, I see it. There's a lot of vicarious trauma. But what I try to tell people, find other ways to have an impact. All politics is local. I mean, state law, I think, has the greatest impact than, you know, federal, on my personal opinion. And it has the greatest impact when it comes to being implemented because it's more on a smaller scale. And so when you think of, so the deception law that I wrote, before law enforcement was able to, you know, make false promises regarding leniency, like, oh, if you say you did it, we'll let you go home, or, you know, we saw you with the gun, even though that's not true. That has led to a lot of false confessions. And I had the pleasure of working alongside several individuals that were wrongfully incarcerated as teenagers. Some had spent up to over 20 years wrongfully incarcerated, went in as teenagers for murder. And the common theme in those cases, mind you, teenagers, one was sentenced to 35 years. DNA exonerated him, but that false confession stemmed from law enforcement using deceptive tactics. And so that was a law. And so the great thing about legislation, well, in Illinois, it's, you know, we call it 91. You need 60 in the House, 30 in the Senate, and the governor signed it, and then you got a law. 91 people is not that hard, you know, relative to like Congress, but it has a huge impact. That's the crazy thing. And so I always tell people, to be a lobbyist, you don't have to be this, you know, snazzy, political savvy individual. You have to have a story. You have to be someone that's passionate and tied to it. And for people to read that passion and see that it's genuine. I find that to be the most effective mechanism of getting people to vote a certain way. There's nothing like hearing a directly impacted person saying, if this law had existed in my life, I would not have experienced this. And because I've experienced this, I want to make sure other people don't experience that. And I feel that, you know, the rich diversity at Stony Brook University really lends itself to that, because there is a diversity of experience throughout that campus. And I think that the other thing is like learning from each other's experiences, because then you realize, okay, well, I didn't realize that something that's so as nuanced as this law has such a detrimental impact on this community because I don't live in that community. And things that you would normally overlook could be really monumental in other people's lives. And that's actually how I got like really immersed into this, just going to community meetings, listening, you know, hearing what people were experiencing. My wealth of knowledge doesn't come from the books or, you know, the reports. That Handcuffs and Hallways report came from listening to students at a high school on the South Side. And then diving in, but they're the ones that elevate the issue. And then I researched it. And so I think that's another thing that I really stress of activism and advocacy really comes from listening, you know, is you don't need to have the megaphone. You need to pass the megaphone along so you can have the most impact and learn something new and a different approach and a new issue that you could be passionate about.
Thank you. You know, anyone who's just joining us, we're talking with Michelle Mbekeani. She's class of 2011. Senior Legal and Policy Advisor for Justice Reform in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. That's in Chicago or in Illinois.
Chicago, yeah.
Am I right? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Chicago, yeah.
Okay, good to know. And you know, I think that this is really special to have this meeting, if you will, right now. We have you here, and I hope you will indulge us to answer a few more questions, just because we you know, I know people have questions, and if you have questions, please send them to Dean Cheryl Chambers. She's there to receive them and helping us to sort through those questions. But we're you know, I think that we probably don't need a long speech. What we need is we need answers, Michelle. We need answers from you. You know, you mentioned your book and your work, Handcuffs in Hallways. That's about the school to prison pipeline. Can you talk to? I would think. I haven't read it yet. I will get it on Amazon. Is it on Amazon? Somewhere?
No, it's a report. It's a report. It's not a blog.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, there you go. Right.
One day we'll manifest that.
All right, putting that out in the universe. But talk to us a little more about that, because that is very important. I'm sure this report talks about the school to prison pipeline and what's that all about?
Yeah, so that again, I was volunteering basically through a program in my law school at a high school, and we were just talking about youth police interactions. And I wasn't really familiar with the presence of the Chicago Police Department in Chicago public schools. And a lot of them were actually stationed inside the school. And that's literally like school to prison pipeline. That's literally like not even a pipeline, that's walking across the street, that's walking across the hallway, and you can be arrested easily and booked. So it stemmed from those experiences. But what that article, the report really unfleshed is that the assignment of certain members of law enforcement to the public schools, some of them had, you know, some serious police brutality cases against them. Some of them had killed unarmed teenagers. Some of them had a lot of complaints for force. And it was alarming. And the interesting part about that is, you know, they identified the issue. What I really did is use kind of my research skills to figure out, okay, can we bring this to scale? Is it just this high school, or is this a citywide issue? And quickly found that it was a citywide issue. One of the good things that I was able to kind of do is through the Freedom of Information Act, where you can get public documents from the government. They have to produce it for you. And that was almost like kind of an investigative experience to really unflesh what was happening within our Chicago public schools. And we found there was a high amount of arrests, a lot of arrests of children with disabilities, obviously disproportionately Black and Brown. But the disabilities part was also a big thing, because essentially kids are being arrested for manifestations of their disability. You know, if someone's having an outburst, you call it disorderly conduct. Like, no, and this kid has an IEP. And so that was an opportunity to not just highlight that issue, but try to come up with solutions. And I'm happy to say that there are a lot of schools now in Chicago public schools that have removed their police officers and have able to actually decrease instances of fights by using more trauma-informed approaches, adolescent development. And so one of the things I've always said with advocacy is it's not enough to be like, here's the issue, here you go, and then walk away from the fire you started. But to also be like, okay, how can we collaborate? How can we work together? And like my biggest thing when partnering at the time I was at a nonprofit, so I was partnering with government, is when you get to the tables, assume the best of intentions. Because if you're coming to the table, each demonizing each other, you're not going to get anywhere. And then the people that are harmed are the kids. So it's important for individuals to come to the table with a level of civility and respect, both acknowledging the issue. You may not always agree on something, but at minimum be able to be at the table and say, this is an issue, let's flesh it out. What can we do to make it better? And I'm assuming that you are coming to the table working from this sector and you want the best for these kids as well. And so that was another thing, like navigating political spaces and government is a skill set that I really benefited from having and actually seeing change. So it's not just training, but also the public school system revamped the whole approach when it comes to social and emotional learning for kids, and how do we approach certain behavior that is seen disorderly, but it's actually, again, associated with their IEP or trauma they're experiencing in their communities. And so I think it was a really great opportunity to partner with community organizations, government, the schools, and really kind of come to consensus of what is best for our kids, and coming to the table with the assumption of no one wants our kids to go be arrested and end up in prison. That does not serve us as a school district, does not serve us as, the prosecutor's office and so forth. And so that was something that really definitely helped. And it was a really great experience for me to kind of collaborate with some amazing people that I continue to collaborate with. And you know the people that are really in it for the right reasons. And those are the people I cling to.
Oh yeah, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. At Stony Brook, one of the things that's going on more recently is we're putting in place a program to help bring education either into the prisons or bring people who have recently been incarcerated to Stony Brook. And that's something that's been happening throughout the country, trying to invert that school to prison pipeline. We're going from prison to school. Mm-hmm. So, I wanted to ask you a question. There was a question from the audience. You alluded to the politics, who's at the table, the process, and brings to mind another person who was a community organizer in Illinois. I believe his name is Barack Obama.
I might have heard of him. I'm not sure.
Well, listen, no one had heard of him at one point, and who knows what the future may hold. And we see great things with you. But a question from the audience: asking what kind of resistance have you faced when proposing new legislation? And then, I guess, in terms of allies or support, they're asking who helped you to push it forward.
Well, so my approach is, meet people where they are in regards to their interests. There may not be people that not that they don't care, but it's not a pressing issue for people to be wrongfully incarcerated and so forth, because it's not, their constituents don't experience that. So when it came to the deception bill, obviously the most pressing thing is, people should not be in prison for crimes that they did not commit. And especially in their disproportionately Black and brown young people. But there may be a jurisdiction that's not their demographic, that's not their constituents. So while they feel for it, is this something that they're really passionate about? And so I really appeal to fiscal incentives, financial incentives for fiscal conservatives. So while you may not be as moved by someone that has spent a decade plus in prison for a crime they did not commit, think about that wrongful conviction cost taxpayers $10 to $20 million. That coupled with the money that we spent to incarcerate someone that should not have been in prison, so that's like $50,000 a year, I think, I'm not sure. That coupled with now that we know it's the wrong person, we have to reopen an entire case, a 2-decade-old case, find witnesses, go back to the scene, and that's money associated, and that's actual labor. So why not have a law that can help prevent that? is it too much of a burden? I mean, it's a cost benefit analysis, you know, like the cost of, you know, pushing this law, and you're like, okay, I'm not really crazy about it, but the benefit to all taxpayers. And if you're fiscal conservative, that is something that, you know, that really kind of speaks to you. And so just really kind of gauging into what's this person's interest? Where are they? And how can I meet them to a place where I'm benefiting them as well? When it comes to like the bills that are hard to pass, it really depends again on media. Media plays a huge role on the narrative of, you know, what's pressing, what's not, what's worthy of our investment, especially with reform. And that's where, you know, communications is huge. I cannot stress how important communications is. Like I always tell people, like, you need to fund a comms team if you want to get anything done, because everyone's on their phone, everyone's on the television. Some people still read the newspaper, but like that is how we get our content, and that's what shapes the narrative. And as we've seen with certain social media platforms, kind of the algorithm, it's like a reinforcing thing. You click on one thing, then now you're going to see a lot of things that reinforce that. And so that really kind of shapes how people view an issue and how people vote. How they vote in that, okay, well, if I'm a regular person in my neighborhood, I see this, oh my God, what's going on? I call my legislator, how are you voting on this issue? No, that's what it comes down to a lot. And that lobbyists speak to that as well. You have organizations over certain groups that have a heavy presence in any capital, any state capital across the country. And so when it comes to allies, again, coalition building is so important. That is one of the things I'm very passionate about. It can't just be the policy wonks, you know, it can't just be the lawyers. It has to be people that are actually going to be impacted by the policy. You know, they're the ones that if you mess up, you know, it's going to go back to them while you go back to your house. And that's why, you know, I always say when it comes to having a seat at the table, it's not just enough to give impacted people a seat at the table. You know, they need to set the agenda, guide the discussion, because they have the most skin in the game. You know, you'll be like, oh, I passed the bill. It's like, okay, but when they go home, how does this impact the way they live? How does it impact their children and their livelihood and having a certain quality of life? And so when you have them at the table, they're really going to dive in a way because they want it to be sustainable and effective, because that's their lives. And they're more informed on, again, those nuances that you overlook, you know, when you're reading a paper, it's, oh no, this is how it actually plays out. And I always tell people what's the law, like, oh, this is the law. But then if you go to the community, it's like, yeah, that's the law, but this is how it actually plays out, you know, and given the cost associated with accurate enforcement of the law, we defer to this is how it actually plays out. And so that's another reason why it's so important that your allies be the individuals. And actually one woman just recently told me is they shouldn't call them allies, we should call them accomplices. You know, we're accomplices in this. We're doing this together. We're both equally invested, as opposed to one supporting the other. We're supporting each other. And both have, you know, really amount of time that we're going to put into this. And so, yeah, when it comes to that, accomplices, make sure your accomplices are people who know the issue, experience the issue, are invested in the issue, and want to ensure that it's an issue that doesn't impact generations to come within their community.
Well put. Yeah, I think. Do you hear that, everyone? Journalism majors, media. I think
if you want an internship to do free comms, I'm sure so many nonprofits will hire you.
Yeah, and German language and literature, obviously not a bad way to go either. You've done a lot.
No, I said journalism internships. Journalism internship. Yeah, if you want to do a journalism internship at a nonprofit, help their comms team, they will welcome you with open arms, and you will get a lot of experience, especially digital campaigns. I mean, if you think about individuals that were exonerated or they halted the death penalty for them, that was comms. That was like media storm. You have like the big celebrities posting. I mean, it's, if you can make something go viral, I mean, it's like with the deception bill, we had a huge digital campaign. Huge digital campaign. Yeah, that's digital campaigns are, especially if you can get at least 2 celebrities to retweet. Oh my goodness. You'd be surprised how much retweeting goes, you know?
Isabel and other people who teach in the journalism are going crazy right now. The chat's going crazy. I think we're getting questions too still coming in. You know, I had a quick question too. You know, we noticed that a lot of these social justice moments are happening in the Midwest. It's kind of interesting to me. Ferguson, well, if you count Missouri, as we learned in the other document, Missouri is kind of the South and the Midwest. Illinois has had its, you know, obvious moments in Chicago, and then Twin Cities, Minnesota, you know, places that you wouldn't necessarily think that these kinds of things would crop up. Can you give us any insight there? What's happening in Middle America that we need to be paying more attention to in the Northeast or in other parts of the coasts or whatever?
I've always wondered why people think Middle America is like super progressive. I've always found that fascinating. You know, like we have a lot of, you know, I call a lot of them considered to me purple states. You know, it's I think because a lot of for Illinois, Chicago is such a big city. You know, Cook County is like the second largest county in the country. So like voting power, like people power, yes. But, you know, we have a lot of different areas across the state. We still have certain areas that are called sundown towns where, you know, Black people know not to be out and about after the sun goes down. And same thing in Missouri. You know, it's one of those things where those stories are not as elevated. And I don't know if it's because it's a smaller community. I mean, how many people knew where Ferguson was prior to Ferguson? You know, that's a prime example of some of these communities are taking the map, you know, really getting on the map because of these instances. And I always say, like, with the communities and the towns that have less media attention, that means less oversight. We didn't know about these cases unless someone had it on their phone. So I think people, again, it's not necessarily a crisis, it's not a departure from the norm. It's always been like that. It's just that small towns don't get media attention. You know, no one's really covering it. It's someone's cell phone. And again, that social media component that's really opened up, you know, kind of Pandora's box of what's already been happening.
Yeah, this social movement, this civil rights movement is one of screenshots. It's one of using video that has really changed things a lot. And also DNA evidence. That's what the Innocence Project is all about.
Yeah.
How is the science, I guess that sort of speaks for itself, but we've seen with DNA so many of these cases that were overturned. It suggests to me and to probably to many people, wow, what is our criminal justice system doing? People that were thought to have been convicted, turns out they had never committed these crimes at all. That's very disturbing. How do we keep our faith in the criminal justice system, knowing that kind of stuff?
You know, again, it goes back to, you know, so I don't know if you know the story of George Stinney Jr. He's the youngest person to be executed, 13-year-old Black boy. And I think it was for like a rape of a woman, or I can't remember, 13 years old. Obviously he was, you know, it was after being executed, like I guess decades later, like, oh, he didn't do it. And so that's the norm, right? Scottsboro boys. I mean, it's wrongful convictions are the norm, and it's not even we care if you did it or not. We just want to find a way to kill you. You know, it's like it's the legal form of lynching. It's, you know, the fancy way of lynching, I guess you can say. And so I think that's our history. And when you think of juries and so forth, but then now as we move more into, like, you know, more progressive reform, we still have to be cognizant of the fact of how we view Black people, you know, especially when it comes to the adultification of young Black boys, the super predator era, where, you know, if you saw a white kid that was being accused, like, oh, he couldn't have done that, you know, this little kid, you know, but a Black kid of that exact same age, size, and everything, and oh yeah, he seems violent. And there's been a lot of studies showing like how we view Black faces and their likelihood of, like, you know, what we associate with crime. And especially determining age, because age is really big on like culpability. So, you know, if you see a person that is 12 doing something, like, well, you know, he shouldn't be held culpable because his brain's not developed and so forth. But if that's a Black 12-year-old, you're treating him like a 25-year-old. And it comes down to accountability and deterrence and punishment, as opposed to what our system is supposed to be for young people's rehabilitation and second chances, and kind of this idea of having a theme of promising future if we intervene in a healthy way. But a lot of Black children don't get that benefit. They're seen as irredeemable and disposable. And so when I say that, is to say that, you know, when it comes to our criminal justice system and wrongful convictions, you know, you could have, there is this bias. There's a bias because if the jury's making this determination, these aren't, you know, juries are everyday people, you know, like me, you, and so forth. Now, unfortunately, a lot of them are not, you know, reflective of our communities. And that's a whole nother story. but they're everyday people with their own biases, everyday people with their own exposure to media and how they view, Black people as more violent. And so they're coming in with that lens. And regardless of how much evidence that you put before them, yes, the evidence will impact them, but that lens, they see it differently. And you can't get rid of that lens. That's just something that we all have. And our lens is very according to where we lived and like what we've been exposed to. And so when it comes to, wrongful convictions and how this is happening in this country, because we realize, it's, yes, we have science, but we still have people that are making these determinations.
Yeah, and extra legal justice. One of our colleagues wrote in there. There's different forms of justice. So there's so many different things happening. We are just in a. I think we're all just really pleased to get this information and to have this extra time to ask these kinds of questions. Because people say that the worst question is the one not asked, and some of us have a lot of questions, and some of them have been coming in, but I think we only have one more minute or two here. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with, or that we should be knowledgeable about? What's coming next, and where should we be sort of thinking in terms of our, in terms of this moment that we're living in? We're seeing a lot of things going on. Where's the next sort of steps for us?
Well, I'll say, like, for students is, don't let anyone make you feel like you're not qualified because of your age or your, professional experience, because there is so much wisdom in just your life experience, and more wisdom than you would ever expect, especially in rooms of a lot of power. And do not shy away from having your voice heard. Like, I cannot tell you how many times people say, I've been practicing law, Michelle, longer than you've been alive. And I always joke, well, and we're both in the same room. So, so I guess I have a lot of extra time. But it's one of those moments where it's easy to feel that you can't speak up, especially as, people of color, Black people, especially as women, Black women. But, do it anyways. And how I've always framed it is, especially in those spaces of power, we come from ancestors that were outspoken at a time where you could literally be lynched without a blink of an eye. In this setting, someone's not going to like you. You may not get hired. But for me, it's like, I do not care if you like me, if it means that someone's life can be better. And as someone who has volunteered in jails, I have spent, the longest spent in jail volunteering was like 9 hours, and been in state prisons. You go into those settings, like, people are literally in cages. Like, it is with a glorified pot attached to the wall as a toilet. The conditions of our prisons and jails, that's what brings my fire in me. And that, like, you could curse my name and have a voodoo doll. Like, literally, if you go to a jail or a prison, you realize this is worth it. Like, advocating to, like, the very end is worth it, because even if someone can get out a day early, it's a day early. That's a day early with their family and friends. And having been able to work on certain cases where, like, someone was able to get out, I think, almost a decade earlier. And when he came to meet me, say, thank you for helping and so forth, like, I had never seen a man so emotional. He'd been in prison for over 20 years. And now has gotten out 10 years early. And those are the moments where you're like, it's always worth it. It is always worth it. And that's just like prison. Now, prison's huge. Now, just imagine all the other issues, like access to housing, homelessness, access to clean water. I mean, there's so many issues in this country, like, it's a little overwhelming, and that's where kind of the fatigue comes. But, like, there's a lot going on. I mean, from Apple, I mean, I can go all day, but, like, there's a lot. There's a lot going on in this country. And I feel like it is so important to immerse ourselves in areas outside of our state, like, there's a lot. So, and then don't even get me started on the world. Like, then we'll be here for another 2 hours. But there's a lot going on.
We got to do this again. We've got to have you back again. You have so much to teach. You truly do. You know, and I just want to thank you on behalf of the committee and everyone. This was really important information, vital information for some of us, for our survival, for our sheer survival. We incarcerate more people than any other country in the world. We have private prisons in the United States. There is a lot of nuts and bolts to this. And so I think we're going to need to continue to have you come back. And maybe next time, it'll be senator, it'll be congresswoman.
No, I don't want to do politics, but but I will say this, definitely Google Angola. Google Angola, it is a prison that is on a former plantation. And yeah, that should really bring it to you of like how connected everything is. They didn't even move, just put it on a plantation.
My colleague Robert Chase will appreciate that you mentioned that. Michelle, inspired everybody. So thank you so much. We must have come back again, and we hope you keep teaching. You do 30, 40 under 40. The accomplishments keep adding up.
Thank you.
So on behalf of the alumni and everybody, we appreciate you and thank you, Simon. Honestly, just thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
So next, we honor and remember some of the people that lost this year. As you know, it's been a tough time, and we're going to hear from them right now. Wow, so powerful. Well, Dean Chambers, Cheryl.
I'm here.
End of another wonderful Black History Month. And some of it is due to the committee and to your efforts. We want to thank you, and we thank everybody just for being here tonight. What do you think?
I tell you, I'm just so full. Just really, we just covered so much ground, and everyone, contributed. It's special time when we're able to come together and recognize our students and highlight them, but also have some real deep, serious conversation about things that are going on in our lives that's affecting us. And as individuals, as a campus, certainly as in the Black community, and even beyond. And so I'm just really, we're blessed to have just an incredible keynote with Michelle Mbekeani, and I'm hoping that all of us have been challenged, really have been challenged to take a step, or to make a difference, or to pursue some level, some way, social activism. Here is, an alum who in just 10 years ago, was right around this campus, and making a difference even back then. So it's just been, my heart is full, and I'm just totally, overjoyed with this program and everyone who's been a part of it. We certainly want to acknowledge, because it would, we have to acknowledge that it takes a community to have a Black History Month program, at this university. And so, listed on the screen, we can't name them all, but the various offices, faculty, staff in these areas, and students who make Black History Month unique every year and make it possible. So I wanna, on behalf of the committee, Zebulon and I, express our gratitude to all of these areas. And of course, we want you to know who all has been on the persons behind the scenes, who've worked on this closing program for us today. And they are listed here. And, again, our gratitude to each of you for the many, planning meetings, deliberations, discussions, et cetera, who brought this event to us this evening. And so in closing, on behalf of the Black History Month Committee, I'd like to thank you for participating this evening. I hope that you've taken something away from this program. Again, thanks for attending. On behalf of Dr. Mbekeani and the Black History Month Committee, be well and stay safe, and we'll see you this time next year, God willing. Bye-bye.